And I want to say quickly before I begin, Manashi was my assert buddy. We went to every assert function together. And so it's really cool seeing a lot of my assert buddies here in the Zoom. Darlene, Scott, Stephanie, you know, Xiao Chun, all these people, Dr. Kilkenny. It's great to see everyone here. Paul, and she. It was wonderful being able to go. I think the provost had said hit the ground running, and Manashi really introduced me to assert. Come on, let's go to these. And we would be at every single lunchtime seminar, every single assessment breakfast. We were there. We would save each other a seat. We would grab snacks for each other. It was just that kind of thing. And it was really, really helpful for me as a new instructor with these large classes to have someone from my department, because it was rare where you would see science people in these events. And we had similar tasks at hand. So it was always wonderful to be there with her. And we always brainstormed on certain things, even with Gabby. We all worked together to come up with really innovative ideas and things like that. So yeah, you wouldn't see me without Manashi. We were there. If I got there first, she was coming behind me. If she got there, I was coming behind her. So we really were assert buddies. And so I'm definitely gonna miss her. I wrote on her door, there's a picture, well, her sign on her door, and I wrote, "Miss you," with a heart and a smiley face. Every time I walk past.
So you are the one that did that. I was wondering.
I did. It was me. So yeah, we're gonna miss her a lot. So my presentation today is I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. I didn't want to present something that I had presented before. I didn't want to necessarily focus on something that I had already talked about. So I am going to share, let's see, I haven't done this Zoom thing, sharing presentations in a while, so I'll just share in this way, hopefully. Let's see if I can do presentation mode, if you guys can still see it. Can you guys still see my screen? Is that a yes? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I've been doing for the past couple of years, I've been looking to see what students are thinking about, how they're thinking about learning, how they're approaching learning. And like Manashi, well, even more so, I try every new tool that there is. I will try, people say, hey, I want you to use our tool. And I try to figure out a way in which I can implement that tool in my class, if not for extra credit or something where I can give them a new experience. So I'm going to talk about student self-reflection as a form of formative assessment. Okay, so this semester I was contacted by Campus Knot to see if I would be able to use their tool in my class. And Campus Knot is similar to Slack, where it's a communication tool where you can post announcements and that sort of thing. And they really pitched it as a way for students to participate. And what I decided to do was to use their polling feature to get insight on what students were thinking about before class, because it's really hard to get students to open the PowerPoint and go through it before class and to know what's going to be going on. So I can say now that we're in the middle of the semester, I see that students are really going through the PowerPoint and they have to tell me what it is that they think they know, what do they want to know, and what they have learned. So I've decided to use the polling feature, and I asked 2 questions before class and 2 questions after class. So the questions that I ask after class are meant to cause the students to actually review the lecture materials before they come to class, gives them an opportunity to show what they already know, because that's one of the things that I want them to know is that you already know chemistry. And if you scroll through this, what is it that you can say that you already know? Sometimes it's, very simple. Sometimes it's complex. And it's a way for them to ask questions, without raising their hand in a large group. And so for me, it's a way to, so what I've been doing is I will write down all of the topics that I see come up often. And a lot of times, everyone is asking the same kind of question. You'll see in the next slide. So I'm checking for misconceptions because one of them says, uh, what have what questions do you have based on the topics that we're going to cover, and what do you already know about what we're going to cover? So sometimes they think they know something, and that would be like a misconception. They really don't. And then the other questions are something that helps me to focus on, make sure that I touch those points. So I have this little piece of paper with me in class, and I mark off all the things that I've gone over to make sure that I've covered all the things that they say that they have questions for. So here's an example from last Thursday, well, Tuesday, actually. So what questions do you have based on the remaining topics? Some people are talking about topics that are next week. They're really not paying attention to the question, and so they don't get credit for that. I first was giving credit to everyone who answered the question, but no, I want you to tell me about what we're going to talk about in class. What do you have? So I picked a few of the questions that people had. How do I use Lewis structures? How do I use it to predict molecular geometry? I still don't understand. I'm confused. Can we talk about the shape of molecules? So I was going to focus mainly on Lewis structures, but after seeing the responses, I said, I really have to get to talking about shapes today because we're going to move on. And I really have to make sure that I at least get in a little bit about molecular shapes. So this is an example of a pre-class response. After lecture, I want to find out, number one, um, if the students have actually learned something in class, and it may be something totally different than what they said they wanted to know. So affirming that, I did learn something in class today. I'm not just sitting here and they have to think about, well, what did I learn? What did I learn? And what's still muddy for me? What is the muddiest point? And I impress upon them that those things that are the muddiest point, those are the things that you go focus on when you study after class. Like, that's what you need to do after class. And so um, sometimes their questions that they've asked before class have been answered. So for me, it affirms that I'm providing clarity on the topics that they had asked about. I also check their responses to see if they still have misconceptions, which I realized on Tuesday I gave them a misconception that I'm going to have to address when I come back to class tonight. And it helps me to figure out if I'm going to share extra resources for them to help them understand what we actually covered in class. So some examples of pre versus post-class responses. So what questions do you have and what did you get clarity on? So these are looking at two individual students. Anastasia wanted to know more about molecular geometry and shapes, and she affirmed after class now she's better able to understand that topic. Um, Vanessa had one question before class talking about polar and nonpolar and electronegativity, but then she ended up getting clarity on something that was completely unrelated to her question, but it was something that she had a question about from a workshop recitation. So these things really help me to see that they're learning. And when I look at the post-class questions, then I could come back again and maybe take a few minutes to address some of the possible misconceptions that I had. So Here's another response about what do you already know and what do you need more help on. So Christine thought she already knew about molecular polarity, right? She said, I'm familiar with it. I can identify it and I can recognize it. But then we find out that after class, she still wasn't that sure, and she's going to have to go back and do some more study on it. Um, you know, although she thought she had an understanding, perhaps maybe she didn't. But I realized also that I spent some time covering this topic, but I didn't really go into depth. So I posted some extra videos and extra practice questions to help them along with these topics. So where can I go with this information? So there's still quite a few students who don't participate in the polling. I have 227 students that are logged in to Campus Not, but the most I get is about 163 responses a day, which means there's a large number of students who are not taking this time, and we know from all these assert things like metacognition is really important in the learning process. And when you figure out what you know, what you need to know, and go back to those things, it really is a part of the learning cycle, and you perform better when you realize what you don't know versus what you already know. So one of the things that I'm thinking about doing is maybe compare exam grades between those who participate in the polling and those who don't. And also do a mid-semester and end of semester check-in and questionnaire to ask the students what they think about the polls. Does it help you focus the learning? What would you suggest? Would you think that it's a good idea to continue to do this type of thing? And, based on the results, continue using this. Because once again, this was a pilot, and I don't intend on having my students use this again with Campus Not, because it would be an additional charge that they would have to use. But figure out a way of how I can continue using this type of polling feature using Blackboard or Top Hat, since my course materials are on Top Hat. So that's what I wanted to share today. And I went from the students' side of, instead of my own personal assessment, assessment of coursework or that sort of thing, but really assessing what the students know and how I can use that to shape the lectures that we have. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Our next presenter will be Gabriela Smeureanu. Wait, I said that wrong.
No, Smeureanu.
Smeureanu, thank you.
I know it's hard.
Also from the chemistry department. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe Gabriela presented jointly with Menashe at the, was it the ACA?
Yes.
ACS?
SCS, yeah, we
Yes,
always,
conference,
we always did a lot of conferences together.
Yeah.
So before I start my presentation, I just want to say a few things about Menashe also. So I knew her from the beginning, 7-8 years ago, when we actually hired her in the department. I was in her hiring committee when we hired her as a lecturer in the department. And since then, I was a very good friend with her. We always went to conferences together. We did a lot of events for the department together, the major day, the new students acceptance day. And my office, her office, and Kirsten office are all next to each other on the 13th floor. So we are always seeing each other every day, stopping by each other's office and try to talk with each other, share what we do in the classes, any new engagement things that we do, or how students are struggling, or what can we do to redesign our courses, evening lunches together sometimes, and just chat all the time. Kirsten, I, and Menashe were like very close, and we're just every day, definitely every day, we're just talking and talking, so we really miss her. Like Kirsten said, we miss her very, very, very much. And I'm happy that I could do this celebration for her, just to show, you know, the work and the love that she did for, you know, she had for our students. Let me just share. All right. Okay, you can see that, right? So since we are, you know, talking about assessment and exploring student learning today, I was thinking to talk about what we do in our general chemistry course and how that was related with what Menashe was doing, because we always talk together about what students should know in general chemistry to be able to translate that into her organic course, and what she wanted us to, you know, explore more or teach more that students can then take in the organic and be successful in there. So I think on Tuesday, you talk a lot about the flipped classroom, and I know Donna described what we did. We worked together with Donna and Pam and Nadia and I, and we did a flipped classroom 7-8 years ago. So we flipped our general chemistry course in Hunter when Donna and Pamela Mills were in Hunter. And then they left in Lehman, but we are still working together, and we are continuing this project of flipped classroom. What we did is we flip our traditional lecture into a flipped course. We change only few components. So instead of having, you know, twice per week lecture, you know, delivered by someone in the classroom, then students go home, read the textbook, they do some homework. We flip that a little bit, that we created the videos so the students can watch the videos in advance. They take notes on the videos. They have access to videos all the time. They come to the class only once per week now. The other class time is used for them to watch the videos. They do more practice with us during the 2 hours when they come. They do an online homework. And during that practice, we do the reef, which is the eye clicker that Menashe introduced at the beginning. It's called No Reef, but we are also using the eye clicker in the class. And then everything else, a recitation, a workshop kind of stays the same. They study for the exams and they take the exams. Now we still offer both of them as of now. So we offer both a flipped classroom that Nadia and I are teaching. I'm teaching an off-sequence course, which is a bit smaller. I have about 300 students. Our on-sequence course is about 800 students. They are both flipped, but we do offer a traditional lecture during the semester on Saturday and over the summer. So we still offer both for students, and we have students that they like traditional. They actually want to go and do a traditional course where they go and they listen to a lecture, but most of them, they like the flipped classroom. And I'll show you a couple of assessment things on that. So when we started at the beginning, when we flip our course long time ago, after a year that we ran it, we did a little bit of assessment. But when we ran it initially, what we did 3 different things. So we kept our traditional course that was actually, you know, taught by one of our faculty and was pure traditional, someone coming in a class, you know, do the lecture and everything. Then we did the other side with the flipped classroom that Nadia was teaching, which was completely pure flipped classroom, only one time come in the class, do the reef questions and so on. And I was teaching something in the middle that was called an active learning course. So we randomly select students from, you know, the flipped classroom, and we move them into the learning, active learning course. That active learning course was actually a mixed. So we gave them access to the videos that the students in the flipped classroom had, but I will also teach about 30 minutes or 40 minutes, even more, try to reinforce the concept. So give a mini lecture on what was that topic of the day. And then we were actually using the reef/eye clicker to do the problem solving. So it was a mix of traditional and flipped classroom. And if you look at the assessment here and what we look at, definitely active learning and flipped classroom, they work much, much better than the traditional course in terms of students' engagement, instead of students staying in a class and the passing rates. But also what we found was that actually the active learning and flipped classroom are almost the same. So me being there and deliver another 30, 40 minutes of lecture in the top of the videos that they already had didn't make any difference, you know, so they were almost the same. And that's why we decided that maybe it's just better to stick with the flip and use those 30-40 minutes just to do more problem solving with them in class. So we kind of drop that active learning, and we offer now only traditional and flipped classroom. Now on the flipped classroom versus traditional, now that we concentrated on, so the two flipped classrooms are Nadia and my classroom. So the two that we both do a flip course during, fall and spring semesters. I'm actually opposite than Nadia. So I do right now the Gen Chem 1 in the spring. She does the Gen Chem 2 in the spring. And then we still have the traditional course on Saturday. So flip classroom works much, much better. And students love it. We do have a couple of students that they just hate it and they didn't like it. And, they move to a traditional course. They do switch from one semester to one semester. So if they start in the, flip classroom and they feel like Gen Chem 1 flip classroom, they didn't like it, the next semester we see them, go into a traditional course just to see if that works better for them. And we've seen people going backwards. So they took the traditional course, but then they spoke with their peers. They realized that, oh, maybe, having videos and more practice works better for me. So they come to Gen Chem 2 in the flip classroom. So we do have this transition there. Now, what we did in Hunter No More is we took it one step further, and we are, implementing a peer TA mentorship right now. So we are using students that they already passed the class with us. So students that they completed, Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2 in the previous year. We email them when they are done with the sequence after 1 year, and we ask them if they will be interested in becoming a peer TA or peer mentors for our courses. We usually choose they had A and B grades, so not very high performance students, but also you're a B student because they still have a lot to give to their peers. They choose themselves, so we don't choose them. We just email them and say, are you interested? They just come further. They say, yes, I'm interested to do that. And we have a course that is called a peer TA course that they register for, and they get a grade. So what they do, they help us in the classroom during the RIF, and when we do the problem solving with the students. During recitations and workshops, they can go and work with other, the TA that is teaching the course. They hold office hours and they do review exams. So practice for the exams before final or before each exam. We set up all these review sections and students are going there. It's very successful so far because we've seen a lot of students that are actually attending the office hours and review sections with the peer TAs. And we don't see that many students coming now to our office hours as a faculty. So they prefer their peers because I think they can talk, more one-to-one, level there, and they can gain a lot from them. They know they're our previous students. They know that they took the class with me, so they can get all the information about how to study, how to prepare for the exam, what I'm asking the exams, and so on. So one more thing that I just started to do in last 2 semesters during the pandemic actually was an undergraduate student peer partner program. So after I use the, early alert, and after they take the first exam, if they fail the first exam, and then if their grade of the exam plus all other components that we have, home or RIF or workshop, is below 70%, I email them to the early alert and I ask them to contact me. And I will try to pair them with one peer TA and kind of, giving them a more one-to-one attention and ask them to go regularly there and ask questions, ask to clarify every single thing that they feel like, they don't understand or anything that the peer TA can help them with. So we just started that. Usually I have about 30 students. So I have a class of 300, so 10% of that usually first exam is always a shock for them. So it's all a lot of math, so a lot of conversions, and so they have a bit of shock there, and 10% are failing it or right on the edge of that they need help during the semester. So far, what we think is that actually the peer TA and the other program that student peer TA, it works. The students, they are more successful. We see an increase of grades on exam 2 and 3 and the final. So they are actually, you know, improving. And we're looking at trying to assess that. So I have two things that I want to look at. Talking with Kirsten the other day, we're looking at trying to see how I can assess this. So I'm looking to assess, you know, before the peer TA was installed, when we didn't have anything, any other help in the classroom, and also look at students that are paired with the peer TA and students that are not, or students that are paired with the peer TAs, but they don't go actually, because we do pair them. And then some of them, they decided they don't want to go. So even if I said, you know, you should go, they say, yes, I go. But then after the first class, after the first office hours, they don't go anymore. And I have students that are actually constantly going to one PA or more than one peer TA. So I want to compare and see if that makes any difference actually in, you know, the passing the class or anything like that. And with this, I think I'm going to just finish up with one of Menashe's picture from one of our events, just to show, you know, what she always loved to do, you know, just teach our students and, you know, show them chemistry and show them, you know, all the cool things about what we actually do in the labs. And thank you all. I'm sorry. I'm just a bit emotional here.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. Next up is Scott Gentile from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, continuing our theme of STEM programs. Scott, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm going to share my screen and show you some PowerPoint slides. So just give me a second there. Oops, sorry, it's being a little bit funny, but I'm almost there. All right, is everybody seeing my PowerPoint? Yes, excellent. All right, let me start it here. Okay, so there's just not much to add about how devastated I was, and I think everyone who heard it was when we were told about what happened to Menashe. She was just one of those faces that you always saw in this sort of thing. Whenever I did anything with assert, you know, any of these professional development events, anything assessment, one of the faces that was reliably there and just obviously cared so much, and just a wonderful, wonderful, warm person who just brought light to every room. If you were having a bad day, she made you feel better without even trying. It really was such a loss. And again, thank you, Julie and Joel, for organizing this. So in this brief little talk today, I'm focusing on some of the things that we did really just before the pandemic. And, you know, obviously COVID threw things off. And so we're still trying to sort out whether or not it helped. And doing that, separating it from all the fuzziness of the pandemic and how that changed everything has been a challenge. So I'm continuing to see how these changes are working, and of course we're tweaking them. So I'm calling this Thinking Big, Major Curriculum Overhauls. We decided after deciding lots of little things were not having the effect we wanted, and also affordability and access, one of the more recent things we found and have demonstrated solidly make such a difference to student learning. So let me get right to that. So full curriculum overhaul. I've been doing assessment for the Math and Stat department since 2010. And, you know, we saw limited bits of success in a course here or there. Sometimes it would stick. Sometimes there would be regression to the mean after a semester or two, but it wasn't the big changes we wanted to see in terms of retention, DFW rates going down, GPAs going up, all the things that, especially in those early years, we were focused on having assessment do. So a few years back, really just before the pandemic, we decided to think big. We did a full curriculum overhaul of our gateway courses, the things that help get you, into your math and science major. And I'm just going to outline that, and then talk a little bit about how that's worked to the extent we've been able to measure it, and then talk about the affordability and access piece just a little bit. So we dropped our pre-algebra workshop. That was our remedial not course, because we're not allowed to have a remedial course, even though a lot of students do need it for math, and I imagine for other subjects as well. But that was slowing students down, right? It took a full semester, or at least a winter or summer break that they had to devote to prepare for taking college algebra. And so, studies have consistently shown around the world and nationally, that's not good. You want to get students through their early sequence as quickly as possible. Every semester decreases, all the metrics that you want to boost. So the idea is to get them into Calc 1 within 2 semesters, regardless of how they came in. We also had only one calc sequence, which is very unusual. It was a one-size-fits-all for everyone who had to take it, whether it was an accounting student or a physics major or an aspiring math major. That we saw was problematic. We added to that sequence a one-semester sequence specifically for math for life and social sciences, those majors who have very different needs. One semester that included exponentials and logs, stuff that they need to see, obviously, for biology, chemistry, and social sciences, more so than they need trigonometry. So it minimized the trig, and they got that in one semester. Again, also compressing the sequence and targeting it more to their interest, which also has been found to improve success in calculus. The one concern was, what about students who want to switch from that one semester sequence and decide to be a physics major? They would not necessarily be ready for Calc 2, since the first semesters did not line up that way. And we did not want to slow them down or make them have to take another class. So we created a free bridge workshop, something that they could do over a winter or summer session to prepare them for Calc 2 if they were switching to that STEM or more pure science track. Similarly, we found that pre-calculus, what our one-size-fits-all pre-calc, was not doing a great job of preparing them for calculus in particular. One of our studies showed that it really took an A in our old pre-calc for all course to have any chance of passing calculus. That's obviously not good. So again, we split it into one that we made a little more rigorous and intensive for the aspiring math pure science majors, those going onto that track. Another one, which we called college algebra with trig, for students who didn't need to go beyond pre-calculus. And again, implemented right before the pandemic. The early signs are that this is working, but obviously then COVID happened, and it's going to be a while before we really tease out the difference. We strongly suspect, this is what other colleges do, and the early numbers back it up, that this was the right move. Now, for those weaker students, right, we added mathematical literacy courses. If you didn't seem quite prepared for pre-calculus based on your college algebra grades, or weren't quite prepared for calculus based upon your pre-calculus grades, whether at Hunter or whatever you're bringing in for a transfer, they have to take either as a prerequisite, again in the winter or summer session to not slow them down, or a co-requisite, what we call mathematical literacy courses, and just more time thinking about math with the idea that that will help those students who weren't fully ready for pre-calc and calc to hopefully succeed. That's the one where, again, COVID really stopped us from gauging whether or not it's been effective. I'm trying to look at it, and as things go back to quote unquote normal, our new normal, we'll be able to see firmly how that's going. All right, generally that applies to students who got less than B in the course before, with similar requirements in terms of what they're bringing in for transfer. Other things taken into consideration, like maybe they got an A in pre-calculus, but they took it in 2006. That student might technically be able to take calculus, but probably needs a little more help. So that a lot of consideration there. We also applied some other policies. Some students we saw were taking a course and failing 5 times. That's no good. We put in a 3-time limit, which I think CUNY has applied that university-wide now. They could go past that 3 times, but it required an appeal and a sit down with an advisor to make a plan to see what was going wrong and how this time would be different. Pass, no pass, we had to eliminate after CUNY again forced us to change our policy. We definitely did not want students with Ds being able to move forward. So we got rid of that in any course that wasn't terminal, which is no pass, no credit option for anything except Math 100 and 102 are base level gen ed courses, which are terminal. So we didn't mind it there. The CUNY-wide placement test, of course, was garbage, both of them, Compass and Accuplacer. Accuplacer scrapped, thankfully, as we saw with our own data, and as my former chair said, was about as accurate as throwing a dart at a dartboard blindfolded in terms of how well it placed students. We got replaced something which at least the early numbers do seem to show is working better, which is our own in-house placement test, developed in-house, administered in-house by the wonderful Hunter Testing Center, graded automatically. And the nice thing about this is the students get their results instantly. As soon as they submit the test, they know how they did and what permissions they have to register for a course immediately, if they placed where they wanted. Or if they wish, they could appeal to an advisor or course coordinator who would then consider multiple measures, right? The high school transcripts, SAT scores, most recent math course, sitting down and chatting with the student about things particular to their life. Again, lots of studies within and outside of CUNY showing that this is the way to go, right? There's no one number that's going to tell you whether a student should be in this course or that course. The more you take into account, the better. Obviously, we don't have the funds or the staff to do this for every single student, unfortunately, but at least for the ones who want to appeal, this was possible. Again, early signs are that this is working better, but we'll have to see. We had an enhanced college algebra course for students who came into college algebra and needed the pre-college algebra workshop. That was a 6-hour course. That had to be dropped. Again, this was replaced with another in-house system, mostly graded automatically. It can be done anytime, actually. It's sort of asynchronously run, but there is some feedback provided, both automated and by a human, an adjunct in our department who does it. Again, early signs are good, but we'll see. And we added preparation workshops, even for these gen ed courses for non-math science majors, for particularly weak students, and especially those who don't have CUNY math proficiency. And another big point with assessment is, know your student, know what your population looks like. One surprising discovery is that some of our students don't have CUNY math proficiency, which we didn't think was possible. That's the thing that you have to get into one of the senior colleges, but there are actually a handful of students who get in through a backdoor mechanism and don't have it. We now identify those, and just based on the numbers we saw when we looked at that group, they absolutely almost always need support. So we got them support preemptively. Our probability and statistics format also completely rehashed and replaced because the little tweaks to the old one did not seem to be making a difference. And our early alert system was extended to all 100 level courses at the department level in coordination with the wonderful DMLC. That's, of course, now college-wide. So we were one of the departments, not the only one, I think, ahead of the curve there. And that certainly, again, early signs are that that's making a difference. Now, as far as what is absolutely just something everybody should consider, affordability and access makes such a difference. The cost barrier, students were dropping classes because they couldn't afford their textbook or the online system that was being used. When we piloted a few zero-cost courses, OER materials, something that Menashe worked with a lot, as well as all of these other things. Like I said, she was just always there and cared so much about all of this. And those results were resoundingly successful everywhere we tried it. Immediate and statistically very significant results. DFW rates went down, average GPA and final exam score, all the metrics went up. Student attitudes got better. Instructors were happier. It was just all roses, which is something you can rarely say about anything you try with assessment, or in any sentence, even with assessment in it. So we switched to this entirely, these low-cost OER systems in pre-calc, calc, finite math, and a few other courses. Every single time, success across the board. So we were encouraging faculty to consider that in the non-coordinated courses and the major courses, expecting that the more we see of this, the better things will be. And Wow, I think I might have actually almost kept to time there. I know that was a lot, but this is what I'm working on now, and just one piece of it. And it actually is showing a lot of optimism, which again is always nice to say with assessment. Getting people on board really helps whenever you show something is making a difference, not just a percentage on a page, but something you can really point to and say the students are better, they're happier, they're succeeding more. That's a big part of what assessment is meant to do. That's everything that I wanted to present. I guess I'll pass it back to Joel or Julie, who's going to take questions or close things off here. So, yeah,
thanks so much, Scott. And thank you also, Gabriela and Kirsten, for 3 really solid and informative presentations.